the War Within Season 1 Keystone Conqueror title is now revealed. Now, there's been a lot revealed for the things coming up here. We've got class buffs and nerfs, Season 1 changes, all kinds of stuff. So let's take a little deep dive into what Season 1 of the War Within will be like. Among other class tuning and Mythic Plus hotfixes, which we're going to talk about, they recently released the title. It'll be the Tempered. Yes, so you will become the Tempered as your title if you hit 1,500 rating in your first Mythic Plus season in the War Within, and then you'll receive Tempered Hero if you finish in the top 0.1%. Now, I could easily finish in the top 0.1%, but I choose not to. I choose to leave that for other people. I am a man of the people, after all, so I like to allow other people to try to achieve greatness. Moving on from there, Mythic tuning hotfixes for August 7th and 6th. This is important only because really the Dark Prayer affix. So if you don't know, we got an affix coming. It's one of the new Xal'atath affixes, and it was supposed to increase damage that the enemies do over time. But in fact, it has been changed to actually reduce the damage that the enemies have taken. So now the way Dark Prayer will work is it will, over time, reduce the damage taken of the enemies. So your enemies will start to take less damage over time until you do the affix properly. Reducing damage taken by 5% every 3 seconds, and it keeps stacking. The buff, once you've done the affix correctly, because now all of these new affixes, they're like a kiss curse, so if you do it right, you actually get a little bit of a buff. The buff now provides you with a 10% healing increase. It was a 30% crit, so there you go. It makes the whole affix a little bit more passive. Before in testing, people were seeing that when the damage increase was happening, that sometimes if an AoE went off at the same time that damage increase happened, it would essentially one-shot the entire group. So these changes are welcome. I think this is a pretty good change for Dark Prayer, and we'll have to see what else they do going forward, but this is some good stuff. We interrupt this news segment to bring you a message from Samiccus. Now, I'm known by many names. Some call me the Killer of Furries, other Lord of Edges. But I prefer a man of the people, and that's why I'm giving back once again. We're doing a giveaway. It's going to be an epic edition. You can get your early access, your mounts, your effects, everything else. All you have to do is join the stream and watch one measly hour. One little hour of stream will get you 1 point to enter the giveaway. Every hour beyond that gives you more points. Subscribers will get 5 extra entries once they enter the giveaway. Guys, get in here. The War Within is quickly approaching. August 21st, I'll announce a winner for that early access on 22nd. Moving on to class tuning. There's been a lot. Your class has likely been affected by the recent tuning. Over the last 3 days, Blizzard has been dropping all kinds of different tunings for everybody, and we're going to start here with Death Knight. So a few nerfs actually across the board for Death Knights here. We see Strangulate, the cooldown. Yeah, the silence was 5 seconds, now 4. That's fine. Moving on to things like Exterminate, got reduction here, an attack power buff that it gives you. Pact for the Deathbringer, a little bit less in PvP. We saw a couple PvP reductions here. Soul Rupture, this is an interesting one. So this is part of the Deathbringer, and Soul Rupture is actually one of the main things they do. It kind of pops off, you tag it, it pops. That one got cut in half. So the amount of damage that one does got cut in half. Reaper's Mark explodes. That one got reduced from 30% to 20% of damage dealt. So there's a couple reductions there. Wave of Souls for Blood got reduced in terms of how much attack power it'll use.
We have a realm to destroy.
Peers off, thank you for the follow and welcome to our Scourge. So for this one, Reaper's Mark ends, 4th burst, and the Shadow of Shadow Frost energy and back, dealing only 69% of your attack power and Shadow Frost damage. It was 86%, so that's another little reduction there. So a few nerfs for Death Knight in general, mainly looking at the hero talents of Deathbringer, but for Blood and Frost as well. Moving on to Evoker, we see a couple different things happening here for Devastation, mainly some nerfs, and maybe a couple reductions and cooldowns, but Mass Disintegrate marks your primary target for destruction for the next 6 seconds. That was 10, so that's a little bit of a reduction there. We also see Mass Eruption, same thing. The target is now marked for only 6 seconds rather than 10. Mass Disintegrate for a Scale Commander. The reduction there, Disintegrate damage used to be an increase of 25%, now it's 15%. Same with Mass Eruption. Eruption damage was 25%, now 15%. So, and then Life Cinders. This is a pretty big one. Renewing Blaze also applies to your target and one nearby injured ally at 100% of the value now 50%. So that's been cut in half. A few little nerfs there for Evoker. Hunter is seeing a little bit of a bluff here. Laceration. Yes, when pets are critically struck, when pets critically strike, they cause their target to bleed for 5%. Now 8% of the damage dealt over the last 6 seconds. So that's nice for them. Hunters are starting to slowly climb up the charts a little bit here, so that's not bad. We're seeing some reductions here for mages, specifically arcane, but a few buffs for fire. So for arcane, all we saw recently was a PvP multiplier, decrease. A lot of the damage, by the way, across the board, you guys will notice throughout a lot of these PvP reductions. A lot of PvP reductions. I think PvP, maybe people were hitting too hard with the new hero talents and stuff. So we'll have to see how that works. What was a little bit of a buff? Sam can fluff me any day. That's great. I'm glad that's the comment I chose to read just now in a chat. For fire, we saw a reduction here, but for Fireheart, Blazing Barrier's damage is increased by 800%, was 500%, so that's a nice little buff. While World Flame, the damage dealing used to be up to 200% more damage, now it's only 100%, so a little bit, there's some balancing back and forth with Mage. Couple buffs, couple nerfs here. For Frost, we see Ray of the Frost channeling your Icy Beam on enemies for 5 seconds deals 234% of your spell power, and Frost damage was 215. So that's a nice little buff there as well. So again, just some rebalancing for mages. For Paladin, I'm going to talk a little bit about Holy here, but Holy, really, we're going to get into it in the next one. So just give me a second on Holy. We'll touch on it here. But Retribution saw a couple changes here. Wake of Ashes activates. A few different procs here removed. Not exactly sure what those mean, but I will tell you, Hero Talents Templar, we saw some reductions, guys. A little bit of a pullback. Wake of the Ashes surrounds a holy barrier for 15%, now is 10% of your maximum health. Hammer Lights heals you for 5%, was 15%, and is increased from 1% of your additional target, was 2%. So a little bit of a reduction there in terms of what Templar is going to do for you. Priest also saw some changes, and Shadow's Priest specifically, which we're going to talk about in a little bit here, saw some really nice buffs. Shadow Priest doing much better. But for here, we're going to talk about Discipline specifically, some increases in the spell power you're going to get, so that's nice for Discipline Priests. We see here for 7 seconds of your next spell power, 750, 750 verse. So this is playing more off your versatility than it was before. Some nice buffs there for you guys. It's a lot more, actually, in terms of how much spell power you have versus verse. This is mainly for assaulting an enemy's mind, Discipline and Holy, shadow damage, and briefly reversing their perception of reality for 7 seconds. So it's going to play more off of your spell power than it was before. That's actually a pretty nice buff from 400 to 750. You're talking about almost doubling there. For Holy Priest, we see some buffs as well. Healing an efficient spell. Heals an ally for 868% of their health, was 723. So that's a nice little buff. And a few other little changes there. Rogue. Not seeing much change on Rogue here for this day. Really nothing. I'm looking at it, not much. Cooldown reduction for Gouge. It looks like cooldown changed from 20%, 20-second cooldown to 25 seconds. Oh, so that's a 5-second increase. Yeah, 5-second increase on your Gouge. Not sure how much that's going to affect your rotation. Shamans just seeing a couple changes across the board here for some different totems. We saw some increases in how some totems will work. Earthquake specifically, not a totem, but this Earthquake spell is getting a nice little increase here, the amount of damage it's going to deal based on your versatility. We're also seeing Liquid Magma totem, a reduction, I should say, in the amount of damage it's going to do. Oh yeah, look at that, 141, now 99% of your spell power. So that's a little bit sad. And also a reduction in the scaling of its damage. 54% of your spell power was 77, so that's a little bit of a reduction there. Shamans overall are in a good spot, though. I wouldn't worry too much about them. Recently, I saw some damage charge that looked like it was pretty good. Restoration, we see an increase here. When refreshing Earth Shield, your target is healed for 148% of your spell power. Was 85. Damn, that's a big boost. Oh my god, look at that. Wow. Hero Talents also. Stormbringer, buffed. 200% spell power for Lightning Bolt, was 50%. Same with Storm Strike, 200% was 50%, so that's increasing by quite a lot there. We see a, what is this, Elemental Storm and fire damage reductions and cooldowns was 10% now 5 was 10 seconds now 5 seconds. And then Totemic Oversurge while ascending is active. Surging Totem is 60% more effective only rather than 150. So actually looking at all of these changes, we see some buffs and some nerfs. So a little bit of just rebalancing, kind of like I just spoke about earlier. But overall, Shamans, I wouldn't worry too much about them. They are in a pretty decent spot. For Warlocks, Affliction. We're seeing a little bit of a buff here. Your damage periodically affects your spells, eruptions targets, causing 45% damage, was 38. So a nice little buff there. We're also seeing buffs to Soul Rot. Soul Rot, your primary target suffers 121% of your spell power, now 193% of your spell power, making spell power that much more important. There is a theme here, seemingly, with spell power, that Blizzard seems to want to be buffing it a little bit more. They're making it more important for a bunch of classes, buffing the amount of that it affects you, essentially. So that's pretty nice. Unstable Affliction, again, a spell power buff, increasing the amount of damage it deals based on your spell power, so that's nice. Destruction, seeing a buff as well. Chaos Bolt, now dealing more damage based on your critical strike, was 228% buffed on your critical strike or spell power, now is 262%. So far we've seen buffs across the board, it looks like, for Warlocks for the most part. Runation. Runation seems to be a little bit of a nerf, actually. Calling down Demon-infested Meteor from the depths of the Twisting Nether, dealing 1,127 spell power damage, was 1,879%. So a little bit of a reduction there. But for the most part, it looks like Warlocks actually got a little bit of a buff. Shadow Bolt PvP multiplier actually increased here. So that's a little bit different than we've seen mostly from PvP, which was reductions in damage. Moving on to some of the other classes here. Monk, we're seeing an increase across the board. Energy Spenders deals an additional 20% damage, was 15. And same here. This is all for efficient training, is getting buffed pretty nicely. Wisdom of the Wall. Flurry Strikes deal 160% of your attack power, was 100, so a nice little buff there. Here it is, Holy Paladin. Holy Paladin got some changes, boys and girls. And by changes, I mean it got the Nerf Hammer. Yes, the Nerf Hammer of Holy Light. What is up, Gold? So, unfortunately, if you're planning on healing as a Holy Paladin, you're going to be healing just a little bit less. For Holy Light, we see a reduction here in what the spell power will do for it. Was a 400% increase, now only 380% of your spell power. So a little bit of a reduction there. We also see Holy Shock taking a reduction in the amount of damage it's going to do. So and the amount that spell power will affect it. So those are both nerfs. Light of the Dawn, also doing less based on your spell power, was 126, now only 120%. Merciful Auras, reduced as well. Truth Prevails, reduced as well. Tears Deliverance, reduced as well. So again, reductions across the board. If you've been playing Holy Paladin on the beta, you might want to get in there and try it again, because these things might affect how it's going to work. Retribution, we talked about these. A few little changes to Herald of the Sun, a few reductions here as well, a little bit of a nerf. And then in general, we see a couple other nerfs. So Paladin getting a bit of the nerf hammer, unfortunately, especially Holy. Holy seemed to get hit the hardest when it came to these. Moving on to Druid. We saw some balancing here out of Druid. Cenarian's Might, seeing a little bit of a nerf here. Casting Swiftmen increases your haste by 12%, now is 10%. And then Entering Eclipse increases your haste by 12%, now 10%. So two little 2% reductions there. How much that'll affect how your Druid plays out, we'll have to see. Shadow Priest got some love. Shadow Priest got some love. So here it is, Shadow Priest. I'm putting you to sleep, Cadence. I just went through and talked about how your Paladins got reduced. What are you going to do about that? Here it is, Shadow Priest is actually the final class we're going to talk about today, I believe. And they got some buffs. Shadow Priest getting buffed across the board, it looks like, in terms of spell power increases and everything else for Mind Flay. So that's pretty nice for them. Mind Spike doing more damage. Surge of Insanity actually getting up to 4 charges, was 2. So that's a nice little buff for them as well. And then last but not least here, Warlock, again, just a little spell power difference in their agony. Just a slight decrease in the amount it's going to do for them. Yeah, always the Priest. Look, Priest got some love, actually. I feel like Priests have been lagging behind. Shadow Priest did need a buff. And honestly, this expansion with Xal'atath and everything, how can you have Shadow Priest not doing a lot of damage? This is their expansion, basically. We got to have good Shadow Priest damage. So that's all in terms of classes. Again, if you haven't noticed, the sun went down and came up once again. So that means Blizzard has introduced some hotfixes once again to the different events going on around the world. One thing that they did change really was that flight stones and upgrade crests are going to drop at a greater rate. So there you go. You'll get more of those. We recently talked about HP scaling being reduced because bosses were just getting insanely fat and taking way too long to kill. But of course, Blizzard's patching this damn event every single day, so I'm sure we'll see more changes tomorrow. But that is it in terms of news.